last one to this one, so thank you for spending your beautiful Saturday afternoon here talking about championing the liberal arts and what does advocacy look like. So my name is Sheena McFarland. I'm the Chief Communications Officer here at Reed College. I've been here since January of 23. I haven't been spent almost 3 years. It feels some days like a lifetime and some days like 2 minutes ago. So, but it's an amazing college that I'm so excited to have to be part of. So I'm excited to be here with you today. Let's talk through what we're going to do. So you all play a really powerful role in advocating for the liberal arts. And I really appreciate you being here and wanting to figure out ways that you might be able to share your voice. So today we're going to discuss how to communicate the value of a liberal arts education, engage effectively with community and policymakers, and strengthen Reed's parent advocacy network. There's going to be some interactivity here. There'll be a little bit of workshopping at the end for an op-ed. So, and if you have questions as I'm speaking, please feel free to raise up your hand. I'm happy to answer questions as we go as well. And there'll be time for Q&A at the end also. So, to start, why is parent and family advocacy important? It really amplifies understanding and value. Right? So families who can articulate the benefits of liberal arts education can really help combat many of the misconceptions we're seeing in the media right now and reinforce its lifelong value to employers, legislators, and peers. I would hope that everyone here is someone who clearly believes in the power of liberal arts education because your students are here, you're investing in this, and there's a huge amount of value that we'll talk about throughout today. So it strengthens institutional reputation, so passionate advocates enhance that word of mouth credibility and influence prospective students and donors through authentic, trusted voices. I'm not asking you to go find a 15-year-old to come talk about Reed or to go talk to a person who wants to donate, but I think that just having the understanding out in the world of what Reed is, what we bring, the education that students receive here, why that's so important for the really gnarly problems our society is facing. And our students here come with incredible knowledge, and then they leave with even more knowledge and this ability to think cross-disciplinarily, to think about how to solve really the most wicked problems facing us right now. And we know that there's a laundry list of those right now. So important to think about how your voices can help lift up Reed and the education that it provides. It also supports student success. So engaged families who understand the liberal arts model, champion intellectual curiosity, resilience, and the broad skill set their students are developing. When I think about the students that I get to interact with, we always talk about, as a staff member, you can kind of get in your day too much, right? You kind of have your head down, you've got all this work, you've got all these people asking for things all the time. In my role, I play many roles and wear many hats, so it's constantly kind of in this service space. And when I just kind of need to take a breath, it's kind of my version of touching grass. I go talk to a student for 5 minutes, and it's amazing how it brings me back to my why. It brings me back to, I work here and I'm so proud of this place because of the incredible students and the ways that they're going to solve problems that I would never have thought of, right? That are such incredible solutions, and there's such passion and zeal and excitement in your young people, right? Coming into this, and it keeps me hopeful and excited about the future because I can see the incredible ways and the incredible impacts that these students are going to have. And so being able to share that more broadly and from your voices is so helpful for people to understand the value of a place like Reed College. It also builds a broader coalition for higher education. Advocates like yourselves can become essential partners in protecting and promoting the mission of liberal arts colleges amid really steep public skepticism and policy challenges that we're facing right now. It's heartbreaking to me when I see polls being done that show the decline in the number of people who think that they would like to send their student to any kind of four-year education after high school. And I see that especially split between folks who lean a little bit more red and folks who lean a little bit more blue, and I think, my goodness, we're leaving so many people behind, and we're not setting people up for success. And thinking about the amount of conversation that's happening right now of the only reason to go to school is to get a credential, to get a hard skill, to go do a specific job. And I absolutely think that's an important part of our economy, it's an important part of learning, but there's also something incredibly critical about critical thinking skills and the ability to think your way out of a problem that isn't just neatly presented to you, right? I was talking with an alum a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying when she graduated from Reed in the early 2000s, the job that she has now didn't even exist, but it was her education here that allowed her to be able to have the skill set and the ability to get into a field that wasn't really around when she was graduating. And I think those are kind of important, even possibly essential things for our society, and really important for us to think about. So before I go on to this next slide, I kind of want to ask you all kind of why you all chose to send your students to Reed. What was it that drew you to a place with a liberal arts model? So I'm going to walk around with the microphone so everyone can hear everyone. So what brave soul is going to raise their hand first and say, I want to share? So, all right, great, here we go. Apples do not fall far from the tree. That's great. So ready to go, eager and excited to share. Yes, wonderful.
We both went to Oberlin.
Okay.
And that worked out.
Yeah, great.
And actually, just the ability to be in small classes with professors who are very engaged and other students who are excited about learning. That's the most important thing to our daughter. And that's what brought her here. Our other kids didn't want that. She wanted that. And so it's fabulous.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it.
So my youngest has 4 children, and like you said, your children are all different. One that went to engineering, one that went to Northeastern, another one that went to liberal arts. But this school really spoke to Isabella, and it was the last school that we looked at. And Isabella really wanted to be in a place where learning was important, and Isabella's very studious. And when we came on the tour, something that really struck me was your culture of caring, and how, like, I was like, okay, I don't know if you'll get a job when you graduate, but you'll be a good person. And you'll care about people, and you'll be nice, and that's more important, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say we have really great placement rates for our careers. So the chances of doing excellently after graduation are high. So yes, and I love the culture of care here at Reed. It's something that I have really valued. And I certainly have a deep sense of belonging here that I haven't gotten at previous institutions I've been at. So it's been a really amazing thing. I always say that when I was interviewing for this job, on a campus the size, which is very small compared to where I was coming from, I was coming from a big public art one. I got lost like 3 times because I was very nervous. It was an all-day interview. And each time I walked into someone's office going, can you tell me where this room is? The person would get up from their desk and walk me to the room, right? It wasn't oh, go take a left and do this thing. And it was amazing how much that meant to me in that moment. And that's what I see all the time, which is great. So, yeah, one more share up. Oh, well, I'll have 3 more share ups. That's great.
Another member of the Oberlin Mafia here. So I really encouraged my child to go to a liberal arts college because, again, so an Oberlin grad, I'm in technology and was a science major at Oberlin, and it's really important to me that that was the place where I could study things and really deeply learn things that weren't about what my major was. I now work for a company with a lot of engineers who complain about having to do their gen eds and that the schools where they went. And it's just very important to me to have that whole sense of what's out there.
Hi, I went to a large public university, the University of Ottawa, and felt a bit lost there until I found my way. So for me, I encourage my student to find a smaller environment to go to, but the liberal arts important is particularly critical because I'm in my 4th post-undergrad career. And so it was broadcast, then music production, then an internet business, and I've just finished a decade running a research lab. And I could not have done that without the agility that I received as a liberal arts student. And I think if we teach people to read and write and critical reasoning skills, they'll have a path to remain agile in the future. One last thing, not to sound discriminatory, but at one point in time, I decided to no longer hire MBAs because they couldn't solve creative problems. I apologize to you.
Hello, it's our baby that attends here at Reed College, and she is extremely strong-willed, and so her entire life we ran next to her supporting her. Reed, she's wanted to come to since she was about 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
So this has been on her trajectory, and we walked alongside of her and supported her the whole way, and she ended up here. We lived on Woodstock for a while, and then we moved to Arizona, but like she did not forget about this. We lived there for 9 years, and when it came time to applying, she was like, I want to go. So here she is.
That's incredible. Well, thank you all for sharing those incredible perspectives. This is why your advocacy is so important, because just the, turn off this one so I don't have double mics. Hold on, sorry. It's so important to have these authentic stories, right? And there's so much passion, and you felt that in the room, right? When everyone was sharing the incredible perspectives you all have. So there's some key messages to emphasize in your advocacy. In addition to everything you talked about, probably this is going to say a lot of the same things you just said, right? So there's this return on education, this ability to have 4 different careers after you've graduated because you have that agility to be flexible, adaptive thinkers. There's interdisciplinary problem solving. So again, no disrespect for the MBAs, but also being able to really think about how do you think outside of your field. In our recent Read magazine issue that we had, it was all about science, and it was really the crux of the questions we were asking is, why did you decide to study science at a liberal arts education institution, and how did that change your ability to work within that field? And it was incredible to hear the stories of our alumni talking about how they've been able to pull in, music and humanities and all these other places to think outside of just the very narrow scope that they were looking at initially. And when they have colleagues who can't do that, how that just advantages those who have that flexible thinking. There's citizenship and leadership, like we were talking about, that we graduate hopefully very good people, right? We talk about our incoming classes. And the 3 years that I've been here and welcoming new classes, I love how much we talk about the kindness of the class that we're bringing in. We bring in kind people. When we are looking for folks as our admission counselors and folks are doing their job, yes, of course, there's all the academics and all of the incredible things that your students are doing, but are they going to be good community members? Are they going to be able to contribute and help each other and lift each other up? That's really what we're looking for. And it's wonderful to be surrounded by that ethos, right? And having that be kind of what guides our students. And then, of course, personal growth, right? Curiosity, resilience, lifelong learning. These are things that we talk about a lot at Reed. And the importance of curiosity and being able to really explore that and learn new things all the time. Great. All right, so some practical ways to advocate. As you notice, I'm an EdD, so I do the practical stuff a lot. So this is what we do. So first, writing and policy. So write letters to the editor and op-eds. We're going to go through a bit of an op-ed workshop at the end of our time together today. But share why you chose a liberal arts college for your students, right? And connect to local issues. Education funding, job readiness, there's so much out there that we know that we need to be talking about. And again, thinking about the really big, difficult problems that our society faces, it's folks who have a liberal arts education that are going to help solve that, right? Because I can think about things in this really macro kind of way, and think about different sectors in ways that you might not be able to if you've been really just narrowly trained to just do the one thing. And again, no offense to folks who've done the one thing. And I think it's really important to have a whole bevy of education, and the entire spectrum is really important to have folks who are graduating everything from getting certificates all the way up through PhDs and everything in between. Liberal arts education, though, right now is really under attack as saying it's not valuable. And I fundamentally disagree with that because I've seen the transformational power of the higher education in a liberal arts institution. And it's important for us to think about that. So letters to the editor and op-eds are a really great way to share out what you're thinking and why you have made the choices you've made. and also engaging local and federal officials. So one of the many hats I wear here at Reed is I am the government relations person. So I spend a fair amount of time in DC talking with elected officials, both here in Oregon and then more widely with folks on both sides of the aisle to talk about the issues that are facing us right now. And it's been really important to have that ability to sit down and have an actual conversation with someone about the facts and figures and the stories that we have at a place like Reed and the wonderful impacts that is. But ways that you can advocate, right? Attending town halls and contacting your legislators. It's always amazing to me how well an elected official will respond to someone who is one of their constituents, right? So getting to know who your local folks are from your city government boards all the way up through your federal officials. It's been kind of amazing when you can get on the phone or have an email or a letter correspondence with somebody, they actually tend to listen and hear you. And even if you don't get a direct response, your vote's gonna get tallied, right? They're gonna say, here's how many letters we got about this thing, here was for pro, here was for con. It's really helpful to have that. Advocating for support for like need-based aid, which is something that Reed does, Pell Grants, federal funding, all of these things are at risk right now. And it's important to understand why it's so important to have those pieces to continue to help support our students. And if you can offer yourself as a resource, right? So as a parent of a Reed student in whatever field they might be studying, here's what I'm seeing, right? Having those kinds of interactions are really important. It gives so much authenticity and so much validity to what you're saying, right? Saying, I'm seeing this on the ground, this is what I'm hoping for, here's how I want to see things change. There's also community and network, right? So building community support. So speaking within your community. If you are someone who is involved in school boards or if you volunteer somewhere, you have platforms that you can go out and speak, wonderful to do, right? To talk about why education is so important and why liberal arts education is so important. You can also host parent panels, right? I've been talking with our friends here in alumni relations, so I think there will be some more opportunities for folks to engage with that. We have Paideia coming up in January, and so if anyone might be interested in co-presenting something at Paideia, Paideia is this fabulous week of maybe 2 weeks of learning that we have. Paideia is a Greek word, and it means basically just
Love of learning.
there, that's what I thought. I was like, I think it's love of learning, and then I'm going to misquote it, and I've got a professor in the room, and I'm going to be terrible. So thank you. So love of learning, right? But it's learning writ large, right? A Paideia class I attended last year was about fountain pens, because I was so curious about using fountain pens, and a student got up and had an incredible collection of every level of fountain pens ever, and I learned how to, you never put a cap on the back of a fountain pen. These are the things I learned. I now have some fountain pens of my own, but it could be wide, and so I think having the ability to talk with folks about why advocacy is important and how to advocate, I would love to have parents who are involved and wanting to be part of that come speak with me. So hit me up if you are interested. So, or one of our fabulous alumni relations folks, and parent and relations folks, sorry. So also strengthening the parent network, right? So coordinating stories and advocacy ideas with each other. So many of you have different perspectives on why you're sending your students to Reed. What a powerhouse to be able to put that together into one thought, right? Create shared drives for templates and letters. We'll go through this advocacy toolkit here in just a moment that has some sample letters, those kinds of things, so we can build on those pieces. And I mentor students and connect them to professional networks, right? So that's something that many of our parents and alumni do really well here, is make sure that folks are connected. And so when a student wants to do kind of an informational interview about a field, or hey, what's your job and what does that look like and how did you get there, those kinds of moments are incredibly helpful to help guide our students after they graduated. All right, so moving into this. Before I move on to this kind of doing the things, questions so far? Yes, the mic really quick, sorry.
Recently passed a big, beautiful bill exempted from the endowment, the threat of the endowment, well, not threat, it's the reality of the endowment tax, schools under 3,000, including the schools that have very high endowments per student. Can you give us some backstory about that? You say you spend a lot of time in DC.
Yeah.
Could you actually repeat that?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question is, the one big beautiful bill that was passed this July actually ended up exempting several schools with high endowments, but fewer than 3,000 students from paying the endowment tax. And so he's asking for a backstory there. So I'm going to put this on. So yes, I was part of the Small Colleges Coalition. They came together and did that advocacy work. So flew out to DC a couple of times to meet pretty exclusively with Republicans to talk to them about why the endowment is so important and what it is and what it isn't. There's a lot of misinformation about how the endowment gets used. An endowment is filled with funds that are what we call restricted, right? When a donor gives you money in an endowment, you can only use it for that. So if a donor says, I want to give, $1 million for this kind of chemistry equipment in this lab, we spend $1 million on that kind of chemistry equipment in that lab because that's how an endowment works. And so it's not like this huge bank account you can just go take money out of when you need to. And so at a place like Reed, where we have a quite high endowment and quite small enrollment, we were certainly in that space. And we've been paying the endowment tax for the last, I'm trying to remember how many years it's been since the endowment tax came into being, 3 or 4 years at least. And so with the exemption, with the changes, what ended up happening is that there were a couple of very specific schools in Republican districts that they wanted to carve out those schools. And so we said, hey, you're not going to get, they tried it before and they got shut down. And so they said, that didn't work before. What if you extended it out to be just schools under 3,000, which covered everybody who was in the Small Colleges Coalition. And so that's how we were able to get that through. Some really great work from the advocacy group that we hired, the lobbying group that we hired to do that work. So it was an excellent outcome, and we're still fighting the fight because there's lots of talk about bringing that back and doing it differently, but we're hoping to be able to stay in that. Does that answer your question? Great. Okay, writing letters. So in the packet that I have handed out to all of you, this parent and family advocacy toolkit, these are in here, right? So in full, so I just have a slide up here to show a little bit. But I have kind of a couple of examples that you're welcome to riff off of however you'd like. But here's a sample of a quick email to a legislator, right, saying, please support a strong future for liberal arts education, or whatever the topic might be. But it's a really quick hit, right? It's 5 sentences or 5 lines, right? So that counts, right? You don't have to have an entire missive to send to a legislator. Again, some of them will be read. Often what will happen is a staffer. By the way, the things I have learned about advocacy is that DC is actually run by those 20-somethings. That is who keeps the country open and running. The staffers in DC are incredible people and work their tail ends off and are incredibly knowledgeable about the areas that they are assigned to. And so the groups that we got to speak with, sometimes we spoke with the actual congressperson and other times we were speaking with their staff, and both are effective in different ways. But these staffers will look at these, tally up kind of who's pro, who's against, what's going on, what's the conversation, and we'll often pull a couple of samples to send to their elected officials who often read on airplanes as they're coming back to their home districts. So important to keep it short, focused, and tight, right? And this can be really helpful. And more powerful than filling out a form letter, which are kind of looked at as a little bit lesser when someone kind of just copies and pastes something that an advocacy group is doing. But if you kind of personalize it a bit, that really goes a long way. There's also several of the long email to legislators. There's just pieces of it, but the full example is in the handout. That really kind of gets into more specifics, right? And you can kind of share your story a little bit more. And these can have good clout too, because these might be the one that your staffer pulls to send to the elected official to say, hey, here's a really great story. The thing that elected officials love the most is the ability to tell the story, right? You hear legislators and elected officials constantly talking about some specific person in some district somewhere, right? About how, this single mom is really facing this issue and here's how I helped her, right? That's what they want to hear. So if you can really personalize it down to your experience, to your students' experience, what you're seeing, that's really, really, really helpful. Because you've just given them a soundbite to be able to go out and talk about how they're advocating for or against a proposed bill because of people like you and your students, right? So think through how you can succinctly tell that story to give them that quick soundbite that they can kind of bring down into a real person moment. There's also sample letters to the editor. So if you're not speaking directly to your elected officials, doing work within the print pages or digital pages of your local newspaper can be really, really helpful. And so these are about 180 to 200 words. They're quite tight. And a letter to the editor is typically a lot easier to get published than an op-ed. We'll go through the op-ed workshop and talk through that a little bit, but really helpful. The thing with the letter to the editor is it's got to be quick, right? You've got to, if a story pops up, the next day they want to run a letter to the editor in response to it. So if you see something in your local paper and you go, hey, I have a response to that because I agree or disagree with whatever might be being proposed, excuse me, that's a really great time to draft quickly something to get to your newspaper. And the timing on that can be really, really, really tight, but really helpful if you have something. And so if you kind of have ideas of, here are the 3 things that I would write about because these are important to me, and kind of have something a little bit drafted and you can just change kind of the intro graph to reference the article, that's really helpful because these things do have to be done quite quickly. But can be very powerful, again, because folks are able to use those to say, oh, I have constituents who think about this, right, and are concerned about this, and having your name and your voice out there in the public forum can be really helpful. All right, so we're going to move into how to write an op-ed and kind of look through what does that look like. So sharing an opinion with your local newspapers. So I'm just going to back up and give a little bit of history of what an op-ed is. So it got its name because it's opposite the editorial pages, and it's dedicated to commentary. So the editorial page is written by the opinion writers who are paid by the newspaper. The op-ed space is for folks like you, who are readers, who want to share their opinions but are not paid staff members. It's brief commentary on current events in an opinion piece. And it is written by folks who are, like I said, subject matter experts, right, who have something to share rather than just the paid folks there. And it's usually about 800 words long, depending on the publishing platform, right? So again, it's still pretty darn tight, which is important to think about. So tips and tricks for doing these well. So know a writer that you enjoy reading. What do you notice about the writing, and what and where and who do they typically write to and for? So kind of thinking about what do you, when you're reading something that you're liking, to take that moment to be critical about it, right? I was a journalist for 10 years ahead of coming into the world of communications in higher education. And a trick that I always had as a writer was I would go pick up 3 of my favorite reporters from around the country and read their stuff just to get their cadence in my head, right? So I can kind of go, okay, this is what I do, here's how I transition, this is what this looks like. And kind of doing that as you're thinking about writing is a really helpful way to just get other voices to kind of help structure things in your mind. Stay on top of topics and the engagement with it. So op-eds have a little bit more lead time than a letter to the editor, but not by much, right? So you really want to be able to get an op-ed within 1 or 2 days of an article publishing about something. News cycles move quickly. They move more quickly than ever before because of the 24-hour news cycle. So the more that you can kind of see something and go, hey, I'm going to say something about that because I strongly agree or disagree with what I'm reading is important. Stay away from jargon. It's really easy to fall into a specific field or to an area where you use words that aren't accessible to everybody because they have to have the subject matter expertise that you might have. So make sure that you're staying away from that as much as possible. And then keep it short and sweet, right? 800 words. 8th grade reading level for most popular media. Actually, it's really closer to 5th grade reading level, which is kind of terrifying to me all the time when I think about that. But that's kind of where we're at. So really bringing it down, right? So the New York Times is going to bring that up a little bit more as far as grade level, but it's really using as accessible of a language as you can. So here are some pretty great tips, I think, from the Chronicle of Higher Education. So pieces should offer practical, how to, what to do, what not to do suggestions for solving a particular problem. They should not be philosophical or theoretical in tone, right? So you need to have an opinion. You need to say, here's a thing, here's why I disagree, or here's why I agree, and kind of list it out that way. It shouldn't be kind of a think piece on the state of higher education in general. They should be written in a conversational, journalistic style, as jargon-free as possible. No footnotes, please. Include links to and titles of sources you cite within the piece itself. And then pieces must be factual and truthful. No narrative liberties, no altered facts, right? We are not in a post-truth nation. Truth still matters, so please use the facts that are available to you. And there's so many great sources out there for good facts. So. And questions to ask yourself before you start writing. So, where do you want your voice to be heard? What is it that is it your local paper? Is it somewhere bigger? I will say the chances of getting published in like the New York Times, really small, right? But getting, published in the Des Moines Register, probably a little bit higher. The Salt Lake Tribune, my hometown paper where I worked for a decade, a lot higher, right? So think about your reach and who in your community you want to be speaking to. And think about the pros and cons of each of those, right? Do you want the higher chance of getting published rather than going out into somewhere where you're not going to be able to potentially get published and not get heard at all? And then what's unique about your pitch? How are you unlike anyone else who's thinking about this? I think an obvious answer for you all is that you have a student who is in liberal arts education right now, right? So what does that inform you about? Why did you make that investment? Why did you choose to support your student as they went on this journey? When you have a student who, since 5 years old, has been like, I'm going to this one school and here's why, right? What an incredible story. And that had nothing to do with any of the marketing work I do, right? There was something that just grabbed their attention and said, this is what I want. And good on you for walking that path with them. And then think about who is your audience, right? When you're writing an op-ed, you are writing for the readers of that paper, but are you actually trying to communicate with your elected officials? Are you trying to communicate with your neighbor? Are you trying to communicate with a bigger society writ large? So really think about who it is you're trying to influence. Who is it that you want to have think, feel, or do something differently because they have read your op-ed? And why are you writing, right? Are you responding to breaking news or an emerging trend? Is this a first-person experience? I would highly recommend the first-person experience for you all. That's going to be really, really compelling, right? To see whatever transformation your student might be going through, or what hopes and dreams you have for your student, and what they're hoping and dreaming to do after they graduate, and why a liberal arts education equipped them with that kind of ability. Questions so far? All right, so structuring an op-ed. Make sure your op-ed has a news hook and relates to current events. Make a clear argument. Again, I am for or against something, not a philosophical think piece. Support using evidence, ideally kind of 3 main points, and go back to your high school days of writing the 5-paragraph essay, right? Kind of a very similar structure. Include 1 or 2 counter arguments, or the to be sure paragraph that really kind of answers who's going to push back against you. What's the counter to your narrative that you're putting out there, and so how do you address those proactively so that someone can't just write a letter to the editor in response to you and have something you didn't talk about. And end with a conclusion that has a recommendation or a call to action. So if you're writing in support or against a specific piece of legislation, let's say, the call to action easily could be, please reach out to your elected official and write your own letter, right? Talk to your folks. Make sure that they understand that you are also for or against the thing that you are advocating for or against. Okay, some don'ts. Never send it to more than 1 publication at a time. Publications don't accept that, so they want to be exclusive. So you've got to wait for so I say I always wait for the first 3 rejection letters, and then I try the 4th, and then I try the 5th, right? So op-eds can be super tricky to place sometimes, but do it 1 at a time. Again, don't use vocabulary most folks won't understand, so keep the jargon out of there. Don't write like it's a book, and don't offer only analysis, right? You need to be offering a sharp opinion about what it is that you're caring about. Don't be long-winded, keep it short, and don't forget about your audience. Again, when I was a journalist, I had a sticky note on my computer screen that always said, remember your audience, right? Who are you writing for? Make sure that that is clear to those folks. I was a science journalist for a long time, and so I had to speak with incredible PhDs who were so smart about the thing that they were studying. I did a lot of astrophysics. And astrophysicists, while we all spoke English, they spoke a different kind of English than I will ever speak. But I had to make them talk to me in analogy, and I was like, if I'm not going to understand this, no one else is going to understand this when I'm writing it for my readers. So it's important to really clearly communicate out what you're trying to say in a way that is super accessible for people. some good do's, right? Again, have a clear, strong opinion. Get to the point, use everyday vocabulary, right at that 8th grade level. And there are websites you can throw your text into and say, hey, what grade level is this at? And it will let you know. And you might be surprised at how erudite your writing might be. So 8th grade level is really hard sometimes to get down to. But keep it high level in that you aren't getting into the weeds of something, right? Kind of offer, here are specific pieces that I want to do, and keep it at that level. Edit yourself. If you feel like you're talking in circles, you probably are. So make sure that you kind of have a friend read it if that's helpful and ask them what their takeaway was, and if they can give you a friendly edit. And research other op-eds on the topic to add a new angle, right? If this is a well-written about piece or topic, think about ways that you can add something new to that world. All right, I'm going to stop talking at you. I'm going to give you a few moments to craft a pitch. So I've given you a worksheet. We have pens here if you need one. And they come up with 2 to 3 sentences about a topic piece. This is an opportunity for the audience to receive a condensed version of your writing without even reading your piece. And then we will do some sharing out of those sentences to see if people are kind of tracking what you're putting down. If you get past that part, there are other pieces on this worksheet that kind of talk about what news hook you might use, what your 3 points of argument might be, what your arguments, counter arguments that you're refuting are, and your call to action. So there's kind of a crazy outline to do. All right, who would like to share out their pitch in a few sentences? I was very proud of my baseball glove. I'm not a sports person, and I was like, hey, there's a pitch. I think that's a thing. It's a catch. I know. So, at least it was in the same sport, so, all good things. Would like to share? Great. Okay, here we go.
So it's a little non-conventional perhaps, because I'm perhaps the least likely person to advocate for an investment in a career in the liberal arts. My background is in science and engineering, and it's done quite well for me. And so 10 years ago, if you'd said, are you happy for your son to continue down a path that would not be engineering based, the answer would probably be no. But nowadays, that's not the case, and it's largely down to what's coming in terms of an era defined by AI. It's something that's obviously causing a great deal of consternation for people in terms of the impact on the job market, but the one thing that's perhaps healthiest to look at it is other major advances, like going from being a weaver with the skills of a weaver to knowing how to use a loom. What's the point to spend the time stitching, and what's the point to create a garment? And I think the ability to engage with reason and AI as reason machines is going to be as big as moving from being a scribe to being able to use a printing press. And so the skills that people are developing as part of this liberal arts and this liberal arts education is really giving the programming skills that will help define the constraints of the automated agents that will come to rely on in the future.
Fantastic. That is a heck of a pitch. I think, especially being able to say, here's why I changed my mind, right? This is why these contexts have changed, and this is so much more important now than ever before. That would be something I would certainly pick up and read. So thank you for sharing. I hope you do get to write that at some point. Who else would like to share? Okay.
I wrote that restricted foreign student enrollment is counterproductive for U.S. national interests. America benefits immensely from the large number of students who come to study in the U.S.
Great. Love it.
Essential points.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. It's been really heartbreaking to me to see the numbers of international students drop, right? And having those restrictions has been so hard because it's amazing what everyone learns, right? When you have that diversity and when you have the different perspectives. I was at my last institution, I taught marketing and communications while I was also doing chief communications officer work, and I was in the business school, weirdly because I'm not a business person, but it was incredible to hear students from different countries share their perspectives on what what marketing worked, what didn't. We talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion pieces that were so different in their contexts. I was talking with a Korean student, she's like, I never thought about this in the American context because everyone in my country looks like me, right? We're all kind of the same. It's a very different culture to come from, and that was a really interesting topic for my students to be able to talk through. And so getting to have those lived experiences and shared, really incredible. Great. I think we have a few more minutes together, and I want to open it up for any questions you might have about advocacy or anything else that might be on your mind that I'm happy to chat about. So.
Thank you. I don't really have my thoughts together, and maybe you can help me, but when I was reading the letter that we might use to the political side, to a legislator, it sounded like the verbiage sounded like it could so easily be knocked down with what you're writing is a privileged sensibility. I'm not looking for how is that going to pay the bills and tuition, borrowing, I'm trying to remember the words. Where was it? Oh, yeah, sorry, I was looking at, I believe in all those words, but I just feel like my child, I want my child to be in an environment that values open inquiry, diversity of thought, and academic independence. And someone would say, how does that help them get a job and pay the bills and pay the loans?
Mm-hmm.
And it would end the conversation, I feel like.
That's fair. And that's totally fair. And so feel free to adapt these, right, first off. And secondly, I will say that that can easily be the next sentence, right, where it's like, because you have this ability to inquire, the stories that were just shared among all of you, right, where it's like, because, I mean, our friend here who has gone through 4 different careers, right, that we're not talking about like jobs, we're talking about career fields have shifted, right, and being able to be in this place of open inquiry and being able to say lifelong learning is something I need to do because in 5 years, I might not be in this field and it might be something completely different, right, and that this kind of a place will prepare me to make that kind of a transition. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it
So,
does,
yeah.
and I appreciate that, putting meat on the bones,
Right.
because the bones will just be more just liberal speak and not
Sure. Absolutely.
where people need.
Yes, and this is a bone structure, right? And so please add your meat, right? That's where it's add your story and add why this is important to you, what this is helping with your student, right? So yes, I would not suggest copying and pasting this and sending it to your legislator. Not the intention, right? So, but rather say, hey, here's kind of a structure to follow. Here's maybe some verbiage that makes sense, or if it doesn't, scrap it and put in the words that make sense for you. But please do add in your own experiences, right? And what you think that is, because I do think you're right that having the ability to say, these things that make my student a good person are going to serve them in these ways, right? And that will be an important piece, right? So, good. Other questions? Okay.
Can we get your slides?
Yes, absolutely. We will send these out, so I will talk with our friends in parent relations to make sure this gets out to y'all. And
We're going to have a follow-up email to Parent Family Weekend, and we're going on the parent engagement site, parent family engagement site, we're going to have a link to the video and the toolkit.
yeah, so I'll make sure the slides are up there as well.
Which
So-
will be this PowerPoint?
Yes, so we'll make sure this PowerPoint's there. The toolkit that I've given you, a physical handout will be there, as well as a video. You don't have to watch the whole video. So, but thank you all so much for taking the time. Thank you for sending your students to read. We're so excited to have you here. We're excited to have them here. And please continue to walk the path with your students. And thank you so much.